You're on.
Oh.
You're on, buddy.
Hey, welcome to our Pastor Q&A today. We're so glad you have joined us. Today we're going to be talking about Sabbath rest and work rest cycles and all that fun stuff. It was so funny. This is such a hot topic, I think, for a lot of people, and it's a hot topic especially for us.
Yep.
It's something that we have tended to struggle with in our lives. But we're super excited to talk about it because that just means that we need to talk about it. And if you, during any of this time, I always want y'all to remember that we are monitoring both the Facebook and YouTube streams. If you have any questions or comments for us, please post them in the comments. Please let us know that you're here and you're watching. We want to know that as well. And we're just so excited. It's going to be kind of a two-part, not a two-part in the sense that we're going to do this 2 weeks, but Pastor Kurt is going to take the kind of the spiritual side of what it means to Sabbath rest in the Lord and the Sabbath there, and we're going to kind of discuss that, and then we're going to talk about kind of what it means to physically rest as well.
Yeah,
Pastor
so
Kurt, if you want to hop us in and
can I talk about next week just a little bit up front so I can give you
a preview about next week.
Little bit towards next week before we dive into the Sabbath rest. And I've been asked this several times here recently, and so Evan and I talked about it, and we want to address this issue. Question was asked, if somebody commits suicide, do they go to heaven? And so it's a much broader question. It has to do with eternal security, and is it a once saved, always saved? Can you lose your salvation? And this is a concern for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And so if you'll join us next week, we want to dive into that question. If you have questions specifically related to eternal security, we'd ask that you would send those to us, and we'll make those a part of the discussion next week.
Yeah, please do.
Now, Sabbath rest. Let's talk about that. Under the law, one of the 10 Commandments is to remember the Sabbath, to keep it holy. And it was very, very strict. Now, do we continue to keep a Sabbath day today? Is that Saturday? Is it Sunday? Is it a day? Is the Sabbath rest related more to a person? All these things are questions that we want to kind of tackle a little bit at a time. I want to show you the severity, if I can, coming out of the gate of how important this was under the law and how serious it was taken under the law. I want to read to you a passage from Numbers chapter 15 that speaks about Sabbath rest. Let me see if I can find it here. And the idea of this is that if you broke the law, there was punishment for breaking the law, right? It was death. I'm trying to find this passage, and now all of a sudden I can't find a passage. Numbers 15 about the Sabbath. Give me just a second. I'll find it, Evan. All right. So, verse 32. Let me begin here. While the Israelites were in the desert, a man was found gathering wood on the Sabbath day. Those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moses and Aaron and the whole assembly, and kept him in custody because it was not clear what should be done to him. Then the Lord said to Moses, the man must die. The whole assembly must stone him outside the camp. So the assembly took him outside the camp and stoned him to death as the Lord commanded Moses. And when you read that under the law, you go, wow, holy smokes. Somebody does some work on the Sabbath, let's take them out back and stone them. Okay. Well, there's a little bit more going on than that. But we do want to kind of address the Sabbath under the law and under the new covenant. And where do we believe? What was God's intent? What was God's design? And so forth. So a couple things. When God created the earth, 6 days he created it, seventh day he rested,
Yep.
it says in Genesis. And so God is modeling to us as sovereign God and all-powerful God, one who does not get weary or tire, a pattern of pulling back from labor, of striving, working, accomplishing things, and finding a place where you're just resting. And so this is a principle that's so early in the scriptures.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking as early as Genesis 2,
Yeah, we're talking creation account.
creation account.
When we get here in Numbers, and you read about a guy who gathers a couple sticks on the Sabbath day, and he's brought, and it's like, what do we do with this guy? And they're told to take him outside and stone him. The law was put into place to expose people's sinfulness and their desperate need for God, to call us to walk in faith and to obedience. And obviously we know that there's none of us who can keep the 10. We can't keep one of the 10. We're lawbreakers. It's why we hated Christ.
Yep.
What happened in the Old Testament there was a guy says, okay, I know what the law is, and I don't believe in law, I don't believe in God. I'm just going to go do what I want to do. And anytime a person rejects God and doesn't walk in faith with God, that's what that points to. It's death, right? Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. I believe the Sabbath was always put in place, and this is true even from the creation account. When God creates the earth in 6 days and rest, it's not because he's exhausted from his first 6 days.
Right.
He has plenty of energy and plenty of power. What we believe the principle there is that we need to come to a place where we find the ability to not keep striving in our labor and find rest. And we believe that only is possible through the person of Christ. In other words, it's not that the principle about taking a day of rest isn't needed. God put that into play for us. We need time to refresh, recoup, to pull back from our striving. But it's really important that we don't miss the greater principle. What I believe is at least equally as important, if not more so, is that true rest and the ability to stop striving comes from walking in faith with Jesus Christ. And it's interesting, in Hebrews, it talks about the Sabbath rest.
Yeah.
In chapter 3, it says, don't harden your heart like those who were in the wilderness when he told them, you will never enter into my rest.
Yeah.
And they died in the wilderness, and the whole reason they died in the wilderness was because of unbelief. And so they never learned to walk in the presence of Christ, which is where we learn to stop striving and keeping the letter of the law and learn to walk in the Spirit of Christ. And it frees us from this burden or this bondage. And it's fascinating to me. I'll just speak to this for one more moment, and then I'm going to kind of turn it over to you to talk, because I do think there's a place for the day. And I don't necessarily believe it's a 24-hour, and you've got to start it here and end it here. I think that's more bondage. Unless that's something that helps you in your routine. But I think we have freedom outside of that, right? And I want to speak to that in a minute. But isn't it interesting that Jesus, while he's on earth, had 7 days a week? He could have been healing people 6 days a week. Evan, it's unbelievable how many times
He healed people on the Sabbath.
he healed people on the Sabbath. And he knew it was going to get under their skin, because they're thinking, they're looking at letter of the law, and they're going, oh, you better not heal the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath.
Yep.
Hey, your guys are eating from the grain. It's on the Sabbath. And Jesus goes, man, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, you guys are flipping this around, and you're becoming legalistic and making about the letter of the law, and it's all about the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
Are you able to walk in faith and believe and trust in the presence of Christ that provides you a rest that you can't find in a physical way? Now, I'm not saying there's not a physical aspect to it, but it is fascinating that Jesus, here's why I believe personally he healed so often and allowed things to happen on Sabbath that was contrary to their thinking. I believe he was allowing those opportunities then, and for us to read those scriptures today, to recognize how prone we are to walk to the letter and desire to walk to the letter of the law, which we can never keep in our striving, or trying to be good, versus trusting in the presence of Christ, who has already done everything that needs to be done.
Exactly.
And so he's just over and over, he's giving them these visuals. He's doing really awesome, amazing things. Healing people who can't see, the man with the withered hand, and they're looking for something against him. And I find myself when I'm reading those passages going, oh my goodness, what are you thinking? He's doing nothing but good. How can you be angered by that? Well, they were looking through the lens of the letter and not the spirit, and they were missing the presence of Christ and faith. And so for the part that I really want to speak to, and what I believe Hebrews really speaks true in the end of chapter 3, read chapter 4 of Hebrews, apart from finding Christ, you won't enter into true Sabbath rest.
Right.
That
Yeah.
comes from the presence of the Lord himself. Can I say one more thing just
Yeah.
about my person? I'll say this. Evan and I, and those who do what we do for a living, shepherd sheep, and our pastors, our typical work days are when a lot of people would have maybe their off day.
Yeah.
Right? And so I want you to think about this for a moment. If you're a letter of the law Sabbath person, you're thankful when somebody in your family gets sick and you are able to go to the hospital and you have doctors. Or if your house is burning down and you have a firefighter who's willing to come put out the fire. Or somebody's breaking into your home, you're sure thankful that there's some police who work on that particular day. And so the whole thing, here's what I want to throw out. I think the idea of the Sabbath day being a particular day under the new covenant that we absolutely have to keep, or we're outside of God's love for us, I just don't believe that's what the scriptures teach.
Yeah.
Principally, I think beginning with God, setting us an example of God staying away from the work the seventh day and setting forth a pattern for us. I think it's really important that we have time to rest and to refuel, and that we trust in the Lord's provision enough to be able to do that very thing.
Yeah.
Give you an example. This week, I felt like, and you know how it is. I mean, man, we get going and we take calls early in the morning, calls late at night. There's always ministry need, right? You feel that. And sometimes you go, wow, just need a break. Well, my bride and I shared with you this past weekend after church Sunday. It's like, man, we just need a break. And so we were able to get a lodge for an evening and just enjoy Sunday afternoon and evening and Monday morning just to rest, because we needed to rest.
Yeah.
And refuel. So why don't you speak a little bit about, because we talked about my part of Sabbath being that you won't find it apart from relationship in Christ, and true Sabbath rest, spiritual rest, comes from personal, and I'm not striving to be righteous in God's eyes, but walking in faith, being led by Spirit. You want to talk a little bit more specifically about a day?
Yeah. It's so interesting. When we started talking about this, we kind of talked how we wanted to, like, is it a physical day? Is it a physical day? Is it a spiritual? Is it a spiritual thing only? And really, like what I was telling you is it's a both and.
Yeah.
And for those people at home, I want you, and watching online, I want you to realize that when we're talking about resting in the Lord and taking a Sabbath, it's a both and. It's both physical and spiritual. And in a lot of ways, they're so interconnected.
Yeah.
With each other, both the physical and the spiritual side. So Sabbath means, in the Hebrew, Sabbath means simply to cease.
Yeah, to stop, to cease.
To
Yep.
cease. So, like you're saying, when in creation, when God stopped on the seventh day, it wasn't, when he took the Sabbath and on the seventh day, it wasn't that he needed rest. It wasn't that he necessarily was tired. It was that he just ceased. So the Bible's just saying he ceased creating. He stopped creating. Because we have to remember that God is all powerful,
Right.
omnipotent.
Yep.
He's all powerful, literally all powerful. He never gets tired. But he's setting forward, and he sets forth a pattern for us in that. When he stopped, he took time, he paused, and he looked at the work that he had done, and he was pleased in it.
Yeah.
And he rested. He rested on that day. He took pleasure in the work that he'd done. So it's not saying when we're talking about physical rest, it's not saying that you shouldn't work, but it is saying that there is a pattern that God is trying to put forward for us. And he's created us that way, that we need rest. I mean, we need sleep. The body doesn't do well if you don't get enough sleep. The body doesn't do well if you continue just, wear yourself out and work for, you try working for 2 or 3 weeks straight.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of y'all probably have. And by the end of it, you're exhausted. No matter what, even if you're getting 8 hours of sleep, you're just exhausted.
Yes, absolutely. Isn't it weird how he's put that into play? When you go continually, there's a mental weariness, there's a physical weariness. It'll certainly take its spiritual toll.
Yeah.
Where if you get in a pattern, and for staff, that we've had these conversations a lot, that, hey, you need to be putting into your week some Sabbath rest, some time for you to, in fact, I share this with you. We've been going, what I think is fairly hard on some projects internally, and I've tasked Evan with some projects that I knew he was working on that were pressing a little bit beyond even our normal week. I said to Evan, it was yesterday, day before, I said, hey, you're preaching this week. Why don't you get through this week and take Monday just as not a vacation day, but as a day just to make sure that you have an extra time just to refuel spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, because if we don't get that, it is really hard to lead people in a walk with Jesus if we're not staying rested, refueled emotionally, physically, spiritually ourselves.
Yeah,
it's such a key. It's such a key piece.
It is such a key piece. So when we're talking about this, and I think we took, Kurt talked about the kind of the spiritual side of things. I'm not talking about the physical side, but I want you to think when we're talking about this, it's very much connected. And in fact, I'm probably going to I'm going to reference stuff like. So when we're talking about taking a Sabbath, ultimately we're wanting to find our rest and comfort and our rest in Christ. Our putting down our self-sufficiency and saying we can do it, and resting in knowing that God is our provider and God can do it. God does all things for us. So I think it's very much.
Can I just say something there, Evan, that God will allow us to keep trying.
Yeah.
He's desiring that we're trust, right? He wants us trusting, but he will let us keep trying.
Yeah.
And we see the futility of our labor so often when it's just try.
And so what he's trying to do is by setting forth this pattern, and I think this is what Christ was getting at when he was doing all the miracles, was you're missing the point.
Yeah.
You're missing the point of the Sabbath. The Sabbath wasn't supposed to be legalistic in the sense of you have to just stop doing everything. Just sit in your chair and do nothing. Because anything, they got to a point where the most legalistic Jews would count they had numbered the amount of steps they could take.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I was sitting in a class in seminary, and somebody shared a story that they had gone over to a Jewish friend's home, Orthodox Jewish, Friday evening. They had been there several times, and they always started eating at like 6. And that's because if they started eating at 6, they could, I can't remember the exact time, but they always started eating at a certain amount of time. But this time he was running late, and so they waited on him. And he realized, they were all sitting around the table, and he realized that as it started getting darker, and they weren't turning on the lights, and And he asked them, he's like, do you want me to turn on the lights? And they're like, yeah, you could do that. And he realized that they always turn the lights on after the meal, but they weren't done with the meal when sundown happened at the start of the Sabbath. So
So that act of labor would have been
that act of
outside
labor,
of bounds
right.
for them.
Yeah, but I mean, he felt freedom, obviously, to get up and turn the lights on,
Yeah.
and they were very thankful for that.
They were probably.
But they were being good hosts and not and waiting for him. And I always thought it was, there's that legalistic mentality. We don't want to sink into that legalistic mentality. I think that's what Christ was.
It's
fighting.
very opposite,
Yeah,
right?
it's very opposite. What he's trying to show is you want to take pleasure and rest in God. That's the purpose of the Sabbath. It is a time of rest in the physical sense, but also spiritual sense. I don't think you can separate the two in the sense. And it was funny. I want to talk about this too. If you're thinking physical rest and like, well, I took a day off, or I have a day off on Saturday. But let's say your day off on Saturday is your day to do all your housework around the house. You need to get up and cut the yard, get up, you've got a honey-do list. That's not a day of rest.
Right.
That's not a day, that's an extra day of work for you.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about physical rest and spiritual rest, we're actually talking about resting, spending time with family, spending time.
Things you enjoy, things that are
finding things,
relaxing, things
Yeah.
that allow you to unwind,
Exactly.
detox a bit from the
Yeah.
go
Yeah. And
pattern,
exactly.
to find a
stepping away
place
from the
where you
pattern, yeah.
can literally find some rest in your life. And I know I was talking to Evan about this. We can get in these times where we go, and it was a little while back. We were moving. We had kids that were moving. Life was just really full. And I remember Honey Bun was asking me. She had just a list of things for me to do, and it was like, babe, I need until noon on this. This had happened a couple weeks in a row. I need all the way through noon as a part of my time just to be down, just to refuel, and it was so I was joking about it, but she got it right. She understood that. Yeah, I mean, a part of our week and a part of our pattern. We have to have some time down to recoup, to refuel, mentally, physically, emotionally, and certainly spiritually. Time in the Word, time in prayer, those kind of things. And if we're just running from one thing to the next thing, and Satan's really tricky, man. He loves to load the plate and keep things. And our flesh is like that. We're just like, let me do the next thing. And sometimes we have to just say, hey, I'm going to take this time. I'm going to trust you, Lord. This is a window carving out, and I'm going to find my rest in you. I'm going to find my security in you, my sufficiency in you, my satisfaction in you. I don't have to keep going. I don't have to keep going.
Yeah.
And, so it's this important aspect of our weekly our
weekly routine,
journey with the Lord,
And so another thing that brought, this is one of those things that we see as pastors that, we see going on in the congregations and in people's lives that we wanted to talk about. Not only is it really relevant to our lives and finding our rest work cycle, but we also see it in the people we're called to shepherd as well. And on a greater scale, as well, I was reading a Washington Post article that showed that 55% of Americans don't plan on taking all of their vacation time, or any vacation time. I'm sorry, and of those, 54% feel guilty about taking vacation time. Only 28% of 28% of Americans plan on maxing out their vacation time at their jobs, like taking all of the vacation time allotted to them. So I think it's a much broader problem than just us and and our church. I think it's generally we have
Culturally?
we feel guilty about taking time off.
Yeah, anytime just to be down.
Anytime to be
and
down.
rest.
Yeah.
And you're using the vacation time as a way to highlight the epidemic
Right.
as a culture
Yeah.
that we face. The fact that companies provide it as a value and a benefit, but people inherently don't feel good
about taking it. Right.
taking rest, and so
Yep.
they don't even use the time that's available.
Yeah, so I would say, not only is it a problem, for us personally, we have to overcome it as a culture as well. Excuse me for a
You
second.
need to take that?
Yeah.
So let me pick up here. I want you to consider your last week, maybe 2 weeks, and are you finding time to spend with the Lord where you're finding rest, time to be down? Or are you a person that has to go? You're a people pleaser, or you can't say no, and you can't find that place to just go, no, it's okay for me to be down. It's okay for me to rest. And because if you can't find that place, what it points to is a bigger issue, and that's a trust factor in the Lord. I want to really encourage you to read the Hebrews end of chapter 3, chapter 4, because it really is a matter of coming to the place in your journey where you can find faith and trust in Jesus enough to supply for your needs, and you don't have to do the striving. I remember when I was in seminary, I'll share this story with you quick. It was an incredible season going to Dallas Theological Seminary and purposing to get a master's in theology, because it was such a taxing season, let's put it that way. I was working almost full time most of the time. We had 4 kids when we started, 6 kids when we ended. And there was pressures of paper, test, exams, all those things. And I found myself going, Lord, should I work? If I work, I won't be able to complete my study. If I complete my study, I don't know that I'll have enough financial resources to meet the needs. And I just had to, it was a regular juggling act before the Lord of saying, Lord, do you want me to study today, or do you want me to work today? And on an ongoing basis, and I knew that I needed rest, physical rest. I needed spiritual rest and renewal. Because even while you're in seminary and you went through this, you're spending all this time in the Word and studying, but you need time to rest, right?
Yep.
But the point I'm making is it really is about walking in faith. That's what the gospel, right, allows us, the power of the Holy Spirit, to walk in faith with Christ. And there was times when I'd pray and I'd ask the Lord, and I'd just sense in my spirit, you need to work. You just need to go to work. And I had all these pressures, and I can remember I shared this one cool incident. I had all these pressures, and I went to work. And I was like, man, I'm not going to be ready for my Greek deal. And I hate that. And I had Dr. Grasmick, my favorite prof, and like he was so, his pedagogical method was phenomenal to me. He had a way of stretching you, pushing. But on this particular day, I remember him saying, well, we're going to move this to next week. And like he never did that. But it was like my taking a step of faith with the Lord to work, I just saw it that way. It was like God honored it. And my Greek thing got moved. And then I had time to rest and to be prepared. And so anyhow, I guess what I'm challenging us is, if you don't think you can take the rest, it's an indicator of a deeper issue.
Yeah.
It really is.
Exactly.
The whole thing that Christ was holding forth is, will you trust me?
Yeah.
Can you find rest in me? And if so, then stop striving. So many people get caught up in striving to keep what God designed for us to point to Him, the one that we can find rest in.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like finding rest in Christ. And when we find rest in Christ, He gives us the ability to take physical rest and stop some of the striving.
Yeah.
And
well, I think He's calling us to stop some of that striving. He's wanting us. He knows. I mean, He created us. He knows that we need rest, and He's calling us to that. And He's saying, "Look, I remodeled it for you. I did 6 days of labor. I turned around and I rested, even though I didn't even need to.
Yep.
Even though the God of the universe didn't need to take
Yep.
rest, he stopped what He was doing,
Yep.
and He turned around and He was he took pleasure out of the work that he had done. And
One of his gifts to us, Evan, is
Yeah.
that it's like that weekly reminder,
Yeah.
almost. Is it built in or is it not built in?
exactly.
And it gives us that opportunity on almost a week, just a weekly basis. Can we step out and find rest in him?
Yeah.
Or do we got to keep going, keep going?
So I think as we close today, I think we just want to encourage you both to find physical and spiritual rest, to encourage you to not feel guilty to take vacation time, to when you do on your days off, if you have a regular day off, and you've got a honey-do list to do, or you need to do work, realize that if you're doing that, that is not rest. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, because you should. You need to take care of your home or things that you need to do, but you need to find a time apart where you can actually step away from all of it.
Yeah.
Step away from all of it and find rest. Find rest in God. Find rest physically, because it will make your life better.
I was going to say that as we close, Evan. You know, the question might be, what do I do in that time and how much time? And I would say that what God modeled for us was a day, and so what we're talking about is more than an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Right?
I would say you need to have a day. You need to pick a day, or you need it. It's not an hour. It's not 2 hours. It's not 3 hours. It's a day.
You need to have some extended window of time where you're pressing in to the Lord, and you're physically, mentally, and emotionally being able to rest. If you're doing things that are not allowing you to do that, you're not finding rest. It's more toil, more striving, more work.
Yeah, and it's not. Yeah, and we're definitely not saying it's a Saturday or a Sunday or a Monday or a Tuesday. We're not naming the day for you, because especially now, everybody has different work schedules and stuff. What they do.
Yeah.
Just find some time to rest.
Sounds like a good word. I want to remind you, next week we're going to talk about the concept of eternal security. What happens when someone places their faith and trust in Jesus? Can they undo that? You have people who say, I once believed, I no longer believe. Are they still a follower of God? Are they still eternally secure? This is a very, very touchy issue for a lot of people. A lot of people carrying around a lot of weight regarding the issue of eternal security. Do us a favor, get the word out, share with people that this will be the discussion for next week, and we look forward to joining you then. Do us a favor, and do yourself a favor. Take some faith steps this week and build into your week a Sabbath rest. God bless you.